Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all for this webinar session. Thank you for taking the time to attend this session. Today, we shall learn to navigate through the challenges thrown before us by the VUCA world. And by the end of this webinar, you shall learn not just to survive, but to emerge successfully in this dynamic and fast-paced business world. Our esteemed speaker today is Mr. Afeef Ahmed. Afeef is an entrepreneur, senior management executive, sports performance coach, and human resource consultant with over 19 years of vast experience. He creates solutions and influence results to human empowerment, learning and development solutions, operations, project management, and innovation consulting. So Afeef, yes, we are good to go, and you can take the session from here.
Great. Thank you so much again, Edward. Right. And a very warm welcome to everybody who's logged in. And, it's great to see that, the interest that you've had, with the topic in mind. My thanks to Marticus again for initiating this very interesting topic, especially with the dynamics of what we're facing right now. So we'll explore a bit of it. I wouldn't want to keep it very preachy. I'm just going to share, a couple of insights into the VUCA world. When prompted, I would request all of you to share your thoughts as well. A couple of things to be mindful of. There is a chat option available, so you're free to share your thoughts. However, given the paucity of time and the number of people who would be eventually attending the session, I might not be able to answer all your questions, right? At the same time, whenever you're prompted, please use chat. You can also unmute your phones and you can share your thoughts, right? So once again, warm welcome. I can see the participant list is increasing every second. So we're close to 32 plus 4, 36, 37 people. Great. I'm going to start off on on a slightly negative mode here, right? And here's a picture that I would like you to have a look at. This is the this is when the tsunami hit Japan, and this is after the tsunami hit, and people went through a reconstruction mode, right? So quickly, what is something that you observe between these two photographs here? You could use chat to share your thoughts. Okay, now I can see the chat windows are on. Okay, you see new buildings, and Anup says, where are the buildings? Okay. So on the right is devastation, right? So what we also see is that, okay, Brian is saying quick turnaround, seashore is covered with buildings. Okay. So what we also see is that the landscape has changed drastically, right? So there was, a tsunami that hit the shores, but what has happened is the buildings that were there earlier don't exist. The landscape has changed, the shoreline has changed, right? A second scenario, right? So here's a building, a street, and the same building in 3 months from the period that the photograph was taken, right? And what is happening right now, right? So we're not really used to continual webinars, right? So this is a third thing that I think which is closer to home right now, right? Which is something that we're all experiencing, how meetings have been conducted as late as maybe a week and couple of weeks back to how they're getting conducted right now, right? So this is what we look at, right? So it could be a natural disaster like what we've seen in the tsunami situation, it'll be pre and post, or it could be a man-made situation like war, or it could be certain dynamics in the way business is conducted, right? We'll understand what are some of those typical challenges, right, that the VUCA world poses, and right, and we'll also look at what's how can we ensure that we are not only aware, but we also take certain steps to make sure that we're able to handle these situations with a greater level of confidence altogether, right? Now, let's look at these scenarios again. So we have Kodak, Nokia, we have the the old Indian hockey team, which was known to be almost invincible in in the way they played the game, and of course we have a very popular Bollywood actor, right? Looking at these four pictures, can you just share what are some of the thoughts that come to mind? Let's go with the first one. When you think of Kodak before and now, what is something that comes to mind? Great. Obsolete, extinct, irrelevant. Okay, great. Arjun, Ramesh. Couldn't sustain with change. Great. Thanks, Raja. Fantastic. Lack of innovation, retro, solid. Right now, the irony is Kodak was the company that actually came up with the first digicam. And today, if you look at it, the very company that came up with the first digicam was so passionate about its film rolls, which was 95% of the business that Kodak used to generate from, that they really didn't see where the future was headed, right? And we know where Kodak is right now. Quickly, can you just share a quick note on Nokia as well? What is something that comes to mind when you think of Nokia? Okay, I see adapting to change. Yeah, not smart enough, trying to re-emerge. Okay, do not adapt to the open source platform. So a key word that I see here is not adapting, not seeing what's really happening, being very passionate about how you've been doing things right now, right? Yeah, OS didn't change with Android. And if you look at the Indian hockey team as well, right? The moment hockey moved from traditional playing grounds to what we call as an AstroTurf, the number one team, a team that won, back-to-back Olympic medals, close to, I think, 17, 18 medals, to where it is right now, right? Still, the Indian hockey team finds it a little difficult to adjust to the dynamics of the sport the moment the environment or where the game is being played actually moved, right? Yes, Anup, yes, Nokia missed the innovation bus. They focused on telecom alone instead of the opportunity, right? Fantastic. A quick note on the Bollywood actor that you see on your screen as well. Any quick thoughts that come to mind when you see the Bollywood actor? Govinda. Okay. Same roles most times, comedy, great, thanks, Nilufar, colorful, vibrant. So the other thing you'll also see is, being able to adapt to the mindset of, your consumer, right? And being very adamant in terms of, what's been working, it should work as long as I try the same thing, which might be a little gimmick, right? So a few observations from the videos, right? So thank you all for sharing your brilliant thoughts, right? Just like I said, to set the context on what we're discussing. You could be a legacy company like Kodak, or you could be an established player like Nokia, or you could be a team that's won a lot of laurels, or you could be an individual who's seen, the high and low of, of what you're doing. It's inevitable that at some point, some situations, challenges, and they challenge our ability to adapt to situations. How suited are you to change? Do you have the mindset to change? Do you have the resources? Can you create the resources to change? If yes, then you create a different paradigm for yourself. If no, then these are the examples that we just looked at right now. So very interesting to look at the business landscape today, right? The two things, it's not just change, but the rate of change. Earlier, a lot of seminars and programs that I've conducted, we focus a lot on change and adaptability. Today is not just change, but the speed of change, the rate of change that also makes a huge impact in how we operate as individuals and businesses, right? Some of these contributors to this are globalization, right? The way your product or service or consumer or your business is connected to a different level of dynamics because of the dynamics that different states and religions and cultures actually bring in. The second element is technologies, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, machine languages, right? They're also changing the way we do our business. Our customers don't necessarily behave exactly the way they've been behaving for a long time. Our customers are more aware, or they could also be pseudo aware. They might think they have the right information. The buying habits are different. The selling habits are different, right? Right. There are a lot of disruptions that have happened because of the onset of technology and technical innovations, right? A lot of breakthrough innovations that have altered the way business is actually run. And of course, our new friend, COVID-19 has drastically changed the business landscape altogether today, right? So this brings us to the question, what is the new norm, right? Perhaps business not running as usual is the new norm, right? There's a constant, uncertainty, a lot of complexities, a lot of interconnected dynamics, right? And of course, the picture is not as clear as it was earlier for us to make the right kind of decisions. The environments have changed altogether. And most times we have very less idea on what to expect in a lot of these situations, right? So my key takeaway is the first one, which actually says, business is not running as usual, seems to be the new norm. And it used to be the norm earlier as well, but it seems to be happening a lot faster than earlier. Okay. Um, a few examples. We've seen how, one fruit vendor in Tunisia who refused to give up his spot or who refused to pay a certain amount to a government official in Tunisia, right? One vendor, he refused to do it. And that was captured on mobile phones, and how he was killed. And that one small action of one vendor, a fruit vendor in Tunisia, actually led to the Arab Spring. Now imagine if the same situation happened without technology being available, without digital phones being available, without the transmission being happening so spontaneously, without social media being as prevalent as it was at that point. Uh, Maybe we wouldn't have had an Arab Spring, right? Likewise, Brexit, discussions that USA and has with, let's say, different countries, or the dynamics they share with North Korea and China, impact us today a lot more than they did earlier, right? Uh, Threats from terrorists and cyber criminals, something much closer home. It could be Aadhaar. We also have demonetization of GST or climate change, and of course COVID-19, right? Some of examples that we can immediately relate with. So we are living in an environment that's much more volatile. Uncertainties are a little higher. The interconnected dynamics make it a lot more complex, and there's sometimes lack of clarity on what's really happening, making it a lot more ambiguous for us, right? So that's what we mean by the VUCA world, something that we borrowed from the US Army, a term that was used quite prominently to sort of make sense of what's really happening, right? The dynamics of change at the Army level will happen at a different level altogether, right? Businesses also are facing situations. That's why it made a lot of sense to look at VUCA as a concept from a business perspective as well. Right. So I'm going to take a quick 10-second pause here before I move on to VUCA and some of the dynamics of VUCA, right? Would any of you like to share anything? Um, are we all comfortable so far with what we've covered? You can just use chat if you're all comfortable with what we've covered so far. Okay, great. I see a lot of hands raised. Great, wonderful. Thank you all so much, right? So moving on, let's understand these dynamics one at a time. The first one, volatility, right? I'll start with a few examples. When BlackBerry launched, or rather, BlackBerry was almost untouched, in the business services that it offered. So the launch of smartphones really did not impact BlackBerry until iPhone launched, and then, it was a completely different segment or a completely different dynamic for BlackBerry to manage. Terrorist attacks or negative interest rates that actually change the way banks have been doing the business, right? All these are classic examples of how change happens, right? So change can happen, with low frequency, or can happen at a much higher frequency, right? So when the frequency is a lot high, we say that it's much more volatile than earlier, right? It's fast, but to some extent, you can't predict change when it's volatile. So some of the dynamics of a volatile situation are that the speed plays a big role, and it can change. You have data. There are a lot of fluctuation. There could be turbulence, and usually it does not last for a very long time. It might stay for a certain time, right? And what we have to understand is the more volatile the world is, it's not just changes are going to be a lot more, but they're going to be a lot faster as well. Okay. So that's the first element, which is on volatility. The second one is uncertainty, right? A few examples again. No one expected Kia Motors and just trying to recall the name, Morris Garage, MG. When they launched their cars, nobody expected, not even the very companies that launched these cars, not their competitors actually expect these two cars to perform the way they did. It caught the Hyundais and Suzukis and a lot of the other manufacturing firms completely unawares, right? So there was, a certain level of uncertainty in the way how a customer or a market segment or the competition would respond, right? The way Uber and Ola have actually disrupted the way we travel. At the same time, how a government regulation also disrupted the way Uber and Ola functions, right? So be it regulation in terms of can you use two-wheelers to share, right? How does share work, right? What is something that you need to be mindful of? The way Airbnb, for example, actually, changed the certainness of, how the hotel industry used to function, right? So when you look at the dynamics of uncertainty, when it's low, then it's a lot easier for you to predict. But when the uncertainty is high, there's a lot of unsurety in terms of how something would develop, right? Um, so quickly look at some of the attributes of an uncertain environment, right? Your confidence is tested in terms of how can you predict what's going to happen, right? It could also be an outcome of, how are you able to, read, understand, let's say, data or information, how much knowledge do you have? There could be also situations where the relevant information is not available or it's also unknown. So a certain environment is, the harder it becomes for you to predict what's going to happen. And in a business environment that can, or even at an individual level, that can lead to a lot of, other issues in terms of not making confident decisions, in nervousness, and lack of trust. The third thing we'll look at is complexity, right? Um, for example, if you have a product that is launched in India, so let's take a banking product launched in India, and the exact same product could be a car loan. If the same product is launched, let's say, in the Middle East, you'll find that the same product, behaves very differently because of the extent of which the product is regulated in a certain country, right? So there could be a lot of other complexities that drive decisions, the cultural norms. The world is trying to extract information from China or from North Korea, but you wouldn't, because it's, you expect that from your own cultural perspective, but there are a lot of cultural norms that, drive, let's say, the Chinese decision makers or the North Korean decision makers that make it easy for them to pass on information to you, right? A lot of complexities that we might not be aware of. Another example is placing an ad was very simple when you just called up a newspaper agency or a media agency and say, hey, this is my ad. But today, there's a lot of algorithms that actually look at complex bidding systems, the right time, the right space, the right, person, right? So the environments have gotten a lot more complex. And, the more complex it is, it becomes difficult for us to understand and untangle and figure out where exactly is the gap or where is the opportunity, right? So we'll have to, be aware and take into account that there could be a lot of factors, personal factors, business-related factors that make a certain environment that much more complex, right? And also that a lot of them are interconnected with each other. The fourth area of VUCA is ambiguity. A simple example of ambiguity could be, the conflicting statements that we hear on news by world leaders on a particular situation, right? Somebody quoted something, and a week later, the same person quoted something which was completely opposite of what he or she had stated a week back, right? So that leads to a lot of ambiguity, unsurety again, right? One of the differences between an ambiguous and an uncertain environment is that at times you might have the relevant information in an ambiguous environment, but what to interpret and what to make out of it might be a lot more difficult. Like, so a lot of lack of clarity. So the more ambiguous an environment is, the harder it is for you to interpret and understand what to make of that particular situation. So those were the four dynamics. VUCA: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? So it helps if we get aware of these forces, and we also try and look at what strategies can help us in mitigating the potential harm that they might actually cause. What kind of systems do I need to be ready with? Are there any opportunities that this volatile environment also presents, right? So these systems actually challenges, and we can actually understand the impact of VUCA through a number of engagement themes, right? You can create your own theme as well, right? So right from knowledge management and understanding, making sense of the information that I have, how planned and how ready am I, right? Something in terms of the process management in managing resources, your human resources, your technology resources, uh, your functional responsiveness, what kind of models have I put into place? What are my recovery systems? What do I do next in terms of my forward practices? So the last 2 points are also interesting in terms of, from a system, where are those failures, right? From a model, what are those failures? And from a human perspective, what are those behavioral failures as well, right? And I think at a global level today, we are observing, a lot of those behavioral failures that have also compounded to the system altogether, right? So it becomes important that we understand the impact of VUCA by looking at the different, where has the system actually not been a success? Or where are those failures specifically, right? And the way things stand now, um, this is an unprecedented situation that we're all facing, right? We are facing changes to our working lives, our social lives, even our freedom of movement has got challenged. Global financial markets plunge, recover, plunge again, right? And entire countries have opted for voluntary or forced lockdowns, right? So this is something that is completely new, right? Now, in this situation, the only thing that works is, as you can see, the parrot with, trying to get the cashew nut, right? Sort of indicative in terms of how do I adapt? This is something that, the animal was not taught, the bird was not taught, right? But it understood the situation and looked at, hey, I need to get to something. I have an outcome in mind, right? And I need to adapt. So three things that can actually help us in building our adaptive quotient are, what am I adapting to, right? The environment, right? The business environment, the social environment, the environment at home, for example. Some of you have probably already made changes to your furniture to make sure that you have a dedicated workspace. You've, probably put in some technology at home to make sure that you have uninterrupted, let's say UPS or uninterrupted network connections, right? We're also adapting to situations, right? What is required? We see a lot of emergency situations being prompted every fortnight or every week, where we see a lot of people taking voluntary actions to handle certain situations, right? So the environment, where I am, situations, something that's much more spontaneous. Third one, of course, is people again. So people could be your customers, your family, definitely, right? Your social circles, things that you would actually do earlier, people you would meet more frequently. How are you meeting them? How are you keeping that social engagement on? How are you keeping your customer engagement on? So the key focus today is getting aware in terms of what am I adapting to, right? So it could be the environment, the situation, or people, right? So I'll take a quick pause for another 10 seconds. And, if any of you like to share anything, let's take, you could use chat. You could also share, anything. You can just unmute yourself and, share a few thoughts. Or, let me put this slightly differently, right? Would some of you like to share, um, going back to those three things, right? Environment, situation, and people. Can you share one example of how you've, what is something that you had to adapt to in terms of the environment or people or situation? Yes, go ahead, use the chat window. We'll take a quick pause and, let's look at some responses. What are those people, environment, and situation delay in a specific situation that you responded to, okay? Lockdown extension, if it happens, does this VUCA process in line? know your customer methodology. Okay. Raja, is that a question? New working environment, okay, attrition of people. Okay, Raja, if I can come back to your question later, are you okay with that? Does this VUCA process, is the VUCA process in line with your customer methodology? Perhaps that's what you're asking. Okay. So Arjun, people, attrition, great. Sakshi, great. Learner-led learning with flexibility for self-paced learning. Technical issues in terms of hardware, great. Daily interaction with people, great. Thanks, Adarsh. A bit more contingency plans in case of, okay, failure at home. How to make the work more relevant in the new environment, great. Thanks, Jones. Yeah. So in your responses, we are seeing, environment, situation, and people-related responses, right? Business continuity. Lavina, great. Work-life changes in modus operandi, shift to dig, okay? And, and each one of you know your, specific situation right now, right? Because your situation is individual to you, and you know exactly what you're going through. So what works in one environment might not work in the other environment, right? But what we will look at now is broadly what is something that I can get aware of, and I can even probably apply to see, whenever these VUCA like situations come up. In fact, even the one that we're facing right now, what is it that I can do at an individual level, at a family level, at a team level, or at an org level that can help me deal with this a lot better? Okay. Sakshi, I'll just read out what you said. My request to everybody is in chat, if you can use the option which says all panelists and attendees, so everyone gets to see what what you share on chat. Okay, Sakshi shared that learning, see, business model of new team groups to support innovation, lab-like environment, ignoring structures and boundaries, fantastic, right? I was pleasantly surprised to see, one song by all the, by the Indian actors, and how they've actually taken bits and pieces and collaborated pan-India and created, a pretty interesting song where I can imagine the kind of collaboration they would have had to do using their phones and whatever technology is available. Okay, Jones. Okay, Suraj, you're saying, okay, you learn something new. Great. Collaboration and involvement are key. Constant communication and brainstorming. Great. Thanks for that, Jones. Now let's get back to our, to the screen here, and two things we can look at. One is things that matter, right? You could actually take a, take a book and write on all the things that matter, something that's very important. The second thing you can also look at is things that you can control, right? Things that matter could be people that you want to connect with, people that you have to take care of, right? System that you have to manage, processes that you probably had to take care of, things you can control, sitting where you are, right? You can't even step out of your house without having an absolute definite reason to justify with the cops as to why you're heading out, right? So some things are not in your control, some things are in your control. What I'd like you to do is look at the things that really matter, and then look at things that you can control, and see how can you create a focus around these, right? When you create a focus, then it becomes a lot easier. Once you understand where your focus is, then it becomes a lot easier for you to take the right action, right? Like what Jim Highsmith says, you can't plan your way into solving uncertainty. You have to act your way into solving uncertainty, right? So what you do instead is look at things that matter and things you can control, and see where is the best possible situation of things that matter and what I can control, right? Then you'll find that you're not really getting frustrated in being able to manage things that are one that never really mattered, or they mattered but they were not in your control, or things that are in your control but you end up focusing a lot of time and effort on things that really didn't matter. So you need to find a combination of these two things that matter and that you absolutely can control, right? So you don't focus on low priority items, and ensure that you're able to enhance your scope of influence by looking at these two zones, right? So that's the first step. Next has a lot to do with the mindset that you create for yourself. Are you looking at it from a victim, perspective, or are you looking at it from gradually creating a mindset of a master of uncertainty, right? When you look at it from a victim perspective, you only look at one outcome. You don't look at anything beyond the immediate consequences, right? Um, but we look at the same thing from a mastery perspective, right? You look at a range of outcomes. You think in terms of confidence. You look at it from a much broader perspective. The second thing is, don't look at problem with potential outcomes, but you see uncertain times as opportunities that actually challenge you, right? They actually are challenging you and asking you a question. Hey, what are you going to do about it? What is the move that you will make right now, right? So that's what it's actually done to you, right? It's asking you, hey, here's the situation. What are you going to do about it, right? When you're a victim, you might cling to existing processes, even when they don't make sense. Hey, this is how I used to do. I'm going to wait till things come back to normal, and then I restart exactly the way I used to do things earlier, right? But what you do instead is you start looking at the issues, with what's happening right now, and where is a scope for me to adapt in terms of what is something new that I can add to it. I'm not looking at a lot of the Bollywood guys sharing videos of how you can have a new workout and things like that, right? I'm saying within your scope, within what you do, what is something that I can probably do differently, even if it means having your first Zoom call with your first client or with someone else, right? Or even calling up, with absolutely no business in mind if you're in the, if it's a customer, but just genuinely checking the welfare of another client who's also another human being and asking him how his business is doing and if there is some help you can actually provide, right? um, a victim mindset, the fourth and the last one, is a lot of dependencies on past solutions and how something has worked in the past can actually help in resolving something of today. But the fact is, no, the current system has a lot of flaws. That is what master says. Hey, what can go wrong here? What is something that I need to be a little more aware of, right? So the mindsets play a huge role here. You drop the victim mindset and you gradually start building your mastery mindset. It's a lot easier for you to identify which side of the balance are you on right now. Are you falling into the victim mode? Or are you in the mastery mode, right? Um, it helps us in setting, the path towards creating an agile mindset, right? And it's all about having the ability, the willingness to learn from experience, at the same time apply that to new situations, perform new things, with a much with a different approach. If you look at the physical, if you look at a sports person, right? If you look at being agile from a bodily perspective, and let's say you've stretched and you're able to go all the way down and you're not able to touch your toes, right, with your fingertips. That's your current benchmark, but what you do is you gradually start extending, you start building a certain level of you start pushing yourself a little more, and then where you were the last time. You've challenged yourself and you've gone down maybe another millimeter or maybe another centimeter, right? But you're not where you were the last time, and gradually what you'll see is your body is starting to build up that level of agility again, right? So likewise, how do we build agility and how do we build an agile mindset from a business perspective, right? So there are four areas. The first one is at an individual level. We need to build a mental agility, right? Get curious, get to understand things from a different perspective. Look at a lot of what, if, and how well situations, right? Create a lot of, okay, if this happens and what happens, right? Get curious, get to the root causes, have a broader perspective of things, right? Be comfortable asking questions, getting asked questions, challenge the way things are being done, right? And of course, constantly keep looking at finding, solutions to these problems, right? That is how you find mental agility. It could even mean picking up a crossword book and trying to give your mind that level of exercise again, right? The second one has a lot to do with you and with people around you, which is called people agility, right? So appreciating and understanding others, be a good communicator, be a communicator, right? And it's fantastic. One of the things that all of us have actually observed is the level of empathy that that we've actually started doing. People who we to a large extent wouldn't have really bothered much, right from the security guards to the housemaids to people who do a lot of labor intense work. I think today, a lot of people have to do a lot of these jobs themselves. So I think the level of empathy and understanding how, what somebody is going through has automatically got enhanced, right? So appreciating others, enjoying helping others, getting comfortable with diversity, right? Sometimes these situations actually help us look at the broader perspective versus looking at it from a very narrow perspective, right? We go beyond cultures and languages and backgrounds. I don't think doctors are really looking at, what, race or religion, a patient is. To them, a patient is a body that has to get healed, right? Likewise, we need to get comfortable with diversity and what someone or something is bringing into whatever it is that I'm handling right now, because that gives us the ability to handle conflicts a lot constructively, which is very important. When we deal with VUCA situations, conflicts also arise, and once emotions take over, then that's the end of it. But when you keep the emotions aside, because you're looking at what else, what other perspective is someone bringing to the table, then we're able to use others effectively as well. That is how we're able to build people agility. The third agility has more to do with the our ability to change overall, right? How do you enjoy changing a process? I'm not saying you bring a paradigm shift in what you're doing, but you make a small shift, right? Do you enjoy experimenting, right? Do you like others' views and perspectives? Are you open to feedback? Do you strive for feedback, right? Can you handle the way things are right now, and can you make a little change to it? Understanding the impact of change and how do I manage change. A lot of times we face situations, and that's when we need to start looking at, okay, what's my change quotient? What's my adaptive quotient? But I would say, as individuals and as team members, or even if you're managers managing people, or even with your families, create certain simulated environments, right? Create certain challenges. Enjoy the process. Don't wait for a calamity or or a business thing to fail, or some issue to come up. But you constantly keep putting small simulations, small case studies, see how you respond to it, see how else can it be responded to. What this does is that it develops your ability to handle change overall, right? It's just like flexing your muscle in a gym, right? The more you keep lifting weights after that initial struggle, you will find that your muscle is asking for a little more, because you built the capability of your muscle to to look forward to the next uh, to the next weight, right? So that's what agility is all about. The last one is, how agile are you towards results, right? Be flexible, adaptable, right? Are you driven and excited by a challenge, right? Are you looking forward to accomplishing things against all odds, right? Which again has it goes back to our victim and mastery mindset, right? Looking at dashboards, looking at, okay, hey, what can I do slightly differently? Is whatever I'm doing, is it relevant? Is it giving the desired outcome, right? So these are the four areas. So right from a mental level, which is individual, social level, we also looked at, sorry, change agility, and of course results agility, right? When we start looking at these four areas and start looking at different segments in each of these areas, right, from an individual level or a social level, then ideally we will be able to handle a VUCA situation a lot better. We may not tackle it, okay, we may not be able to resolve the issue, but our ability to handle it overall becomes a lot better, right? The mindset start to improve a lot towards these kind of situations, right? In volatile situations, you might be able to chart out a vision, right? When there's uncertainty, you might be able to find some level of understanding, or even if it's predictable, you will still start be able to make some sense. The confidence is a little higher. You'll find clarity in complex situations. You'll be able to break it down into smaller chunks and see where should I focus on, what is the gap that I can fix, right? And even if you're unsure, you'll find that your agility, just like I would say, starting off a new habit, right? Or starting off something new altogether, right? You're not really sure, but because you practice agility, you'll be able to handle an ambiguous situation a lot better, because you've started. You have a mindset of starting. You have a slightly more adventurous mindset, a much more challenging mindset. You're not caught. You're not chained because of not knowing what's going to happen, but you're saying, hey, let me see what happens, right? At least at first step, even if it goes to 10%, that's still a lot better than zero, right? So vision, understanding, clarity, and agility ideally work in helping us strategies and building a much more agile mindset in a VUCA environment, right? Okay, and VUCA at times also, sort of exposes things that we were not really familiar with in terms of our skill sets and awareness, right? I'm not going to go into, deep details of this, but broadly just putting it out, I'm sure a lot of us have already identified, we got aware with a situation, then we also figured out, hey, I just realized that I'm not skilled in handling this particular situation, right? You can even relate it to the current situation that we are facing. You could be aware, but not have the right skills, or you could be unaware and also unskilled, right? When something suddenly hits you, then that's when you realize that, hey, I didn't know something like this could happen, but now that it's happened, I also do not have the right skills to tackle it as well. I see some hands raised. I will come back to once, I just go through the next 2 points. It's also possible that you have the skills, you're not aware of, where those skills could also be applied. Sometimes situations, might come up where that's when you might realize that I have these skills and, these skills can actually be applied in these situations. But the best zone, of course, is to look at the more we simulate, the more we, create certain situations, case studies, the more we challenge status quo, you'll find that you get a lot more aware of your current situation, and you also gradually see where those gaps are. You start working towards managing those gaps and start getting skilled in those areas again, right? So the skill and awareness zone, right? I just would like to leave that at an introductory level for now, right? So I'll just pause here. I saw some hands raised. So if I can just go back to those who raised their hands, uh, if you can just go ahead and type what you had on mind, that'll be great. So I'm just trying to quickly get to who's raised their hands. Okay. So Surajit, Prakash, would you like to share anything? I've just unmuted your phone. So if you'd like to share something, please go ahead. Or if you want to type as well.
Afeef, I will take some more time to come back to you on this.
Okay, great. So Rajit, I see your hand is raised as well. Is there something specific you'd like to share or ask? I've unmuted your phone as well. So, okay, great. Monikot, you would like me to go back to slide 26? Okay, anything specific you want to look at? Unless you want to take a screenshot, you could go ahead and do that as well. Oh, great. So Raja, Raja has shared that he's been awarded VUCA for managing a very critical project. So great going, Raja. Perhaps later you can also share your experience of handling this VUCA situation and what you did, right? Okay, so moving on. So a few pointers here. Start seeing things you didn't know, right? So that's more and more of the unknown zones that that you'll have to explore. What is something that you didn't know, right? Like the dynamics of what we're facing right now, right? The second thing is question everything, right? Don't get comfortable with status quo. Question everything, challenge it. I'm not saying make that a habit, right? But once in a while, get yourself and get your teammates, get your family into a room, and start questioning things, right? Pay attention to things that might be a little uncomfortable, right? And because end of the day, right, it's only these kind of questions that actually bring out a different thought process, or situations, right? Anticipate this, the issues that shape up, and also the consequences of those issues and actions, right? We have to be very aware that a lot of variables in what we're doing actually of other things as well. So we need to appreciate that. It could be from a cultural perspective, could be just the way the business is working or the way the service is structured, right? and be prepared for realities and challenges apart from what they are, right? Or alternative realities and challenges. Interpret and address relevant opportunities, right? What is a possibility here? What can we create here? Is it relevant? Is it important, right? Be very disciplined in what you're doing, right? So these situations are new to all of us, right? And no one is a master here. I might be talking of VUCA, but I'm not a VUCA master. You know, governments and presidents today, you know, are still figuring out how do we handle these kind of situations, right? But you might not be a master in handling the situation, but you can be disciplined in what you do, right? So once you initiate something, stay on that track, be disciplined, and make sure that you communicate, right? You stay in touch with people. You know, there could be a lot of you know, thoughts and support that you actually get from areas that you least expected. So stay in touch, be a communicative person, right? And uh, uh, because the more we ask questions, and especially when we're faced with a VUCA situation, it enables a different kind of thought process altogether, right? So one example that I'd like to share is that of Nintendo, right? So Nintendo, I'm sure, you know, if you're as old as me or even younger or older, Nintendo was quite a master in what it did, right? And fantastic video games. They were number one, and the difference between number one and number two was quite huge. Until, of course, Sony and Microsoft got into the video gaming world, and you know, they just took the market away from you know, Nintendo. And so, of course, after a lot of thought and a lot of internal debate, you know, one different thought process that came up was, hey, hang on, we are in the business of video gaming. Now, Sony and Microsoft, you know, they were creating products for hardcore and traditional video gamers. What Nintendo did is they still wanted to create video games, or they still created video games, but they started focusing on a different segment altogether, right? A segment that was not really connected with the notion of video games. That was, you know, the aged people, those who never played video games, right? Homemakers, right? Someone who's taking a break, you know, could be a medical break, could be, you know, could be a professional break. People who really were not connected with your video gaming world, they said, okay, let's defocus on traditional hardcore gamers and let's create something altogether different, right? So they started creating you know, games and certain apps and technologies for those who are not traditional hardcore gamers, right? And that is what we call as, you know, a blue ocean strategy, right? You have the same product, but now you're focusing on a different market segment altogether. And this, of course, a very interesting case study that we use quite elaborately in terms of how a VUCA situation was presented, where you're a market leader and someone swept everything from right under your feet, but you've been able to come up pretty well, because, you know, you still stuck on to the value that you're providing, right? And you asked uncomfortable questions, you challenged status quo, and you created a new business dimension altogether, right? So defocus and refocus. Okay, I'm just quickly looking at my chat window here. So Preeti, will you be sharing this document with attendees post the webinar? You know, you could probably connect with you know, Imarticus on that. Jones, yeah, they now started tapping both with the Nintendo Switch, since the business has been moving more to the competitors, which is a great strategy as they've revitalized their brand, right? And if you look at the value that Nintendo has provided to a different segment, there is slightly much more emotional call, right? So thanks for sharing that, Jones. And sometimes when you have the right kind of emotion attached with a product or a service of a company, then it drives, you know, the next wave of, you know, your late adapters or your early majorities, right? Great. So the last piece here again is, you know, of how VUCA-like situations actually helped people figure out a lot of things about themselves and bring about changes, right? So cricket, you know, surprisingly was actually a dying sport with just a few countries really playing the sport. And, you know, the whole dynamics of how cricket is looked at today as a global sport actually happened because someone said, hey, let's break the format, right? Let's do this T20 thing, right? And the rest is history the way we know it, right? Today, test matches have results because one success format, you know, had a ripple effect on the other formats of the game as well. Netflix again, right, was a game changer, right? Uh, then of course, you have individuals, right? Be it Amitabh Bachchan, right, who also understood, or Rajnikant, for example, right, who actually understand, the mindsets of the audience. Where is my audience moving, right? Stick to their core value. What's the value that they're giving? At the same time, ensuring that the service and product is in line with the value that they've been consistently providing. Uber again, right? Just a few examples, right? I don't want to go in, details with Uber and Netflix because I think all of us know how successful they've actually been. And each one of these have actually been faced with a challenge at some point. They got uncomfortable, then they got comfortable, and they looked at, hey, what next, right? So I'm going to leave this little template on, which you can use. It talks of what's the situation, something that might make it a little easier for you to sort of put everything down and understand the situation and what you're facing at a slightly different level. Maybe you might be able to look at it much more cognitively again. So what's the situation? Why does it exist? Why do I need to consider it? Who's involved? What's an outcome that I want, right? What am I adapting to? The effects, the action plan. If you have a phone, please go ahead and you can even take a screenshot of this. What are the risks associated? What's my mitigation plan? How will I communicate? What are the barriers? How will I overcome? It's quite an exhaustive list, but I request you to keep it handy. And whenever relevant, you can take all the elements of what's on the template here. You can take some of the elements that make sense, but it will be a worthwhile exercise if you just take this template and apply it to a situation that you're facing right now. Okay. So what we've looked at today are the four main challenges of working, and understanding how do we develop an agile mindset. What kind of qualities are required for me to drive myself to be able to navigate through these situations? And how do I prepare myself a lot better through a lot of if-then scenarios that make it a lot easier for me to tackle situations in general whenever they come? So I will pause here, and that basically is it. And I'd like you to, I'll just open this to everybody here, open up the forum, and please go ahead and, share, what is something, if you have any questions, hopefully not too long, because we have roughly, I think, roughly around 8 minutes left. So if there's something that you'd like to share, please go ahead. Arjun, I think that's a great example you shared. BNI is another example. The speed at which a company like BNI, and I think that's going to be a case study for a lot of people who know what BNI is, right? How a traditionally formatted, a business structure change within 7 days into, something that relied completely on human interaction, face-to-face interaction. Within a span of 7 days, they just transform everything to an online model, and they made it work, and it is working successfully and brilliantly well, right? So Arjun, thanks for sharing that. I might use it as, as one of the success stories in the next session, right? Would any of you like to share anything specific? Or let me put a different statement, right? What is something that you feel you can take back from what we've, what you've seen today, that you feel you can go back and apply into your personal and social spaces? Okay, let me repeat. Please use chat and share what is something that you can take back from what we've discussed today and apply in your personal and professional spaces. Okay, you can use chat and share your answers. Okay, Sakshi, let's read out. It's difficult not to feel like a victim. Yes, it really takes all you've got. We can get into mastery only with experience and perseverance. Absolutely, right? So be patient. This is new. This is new to everybody. Every situation requires different mindsets. Some of us have it. Some of us will have to create it, right? So absolutely right. So GST was introduced, right? Okay, great. Thanks for that, Krish. Absolutely. Agility to change. Great. Thanks, Rakhi. Find a synergy between things that matter and things I can control. Great. Thanks for that, Nilufar. Discipline while adapting to a VUCA to ensure consistency. Great, great. Thanks, Abik. Great. So Farad, you mentioned, yes, create a positive mindset, deal with VUCA, right? Develop empathy in the process. Like I mentioned, a lot of you would also, I've seen this happening in the apartment building that that we stay. The extent to which today we understand the effort the security guard puts in, the housekeepers put in, is just fantastic. And I didn't know that I could clean, a floor so well. I clean the floor once in a week, and I didn't know that I was really skilled in mopping as well. So I was very pleasantly surprised with that, discovery as well. Arjun, we have to go back to the drawing board and focus on the core vision with understanding, clarity, and agility. Make bold moves. If you have awareness of the issues, develop the absolutely very well put, Arjun. Thank you so much for sharing that. Very well articulated as well. Yeah. All right. So I'll pause here. Thank you once again. It was great that all of you, from your schedules and the way things are, still decided to take time and sit through this session. It's my honor again that I've been able to interact with you and share some of my thoughts. I'm not a master in this session, but I really would, I was happy to listen to some of your perspectives as well. Lavina, let me read out what you've got. Like the master of uncertainty. Okay, you like the idea. It's a paradigm shift, which can make many more productive. Great. Okay, those I just saw a request. Those who are interested can go ahead and take a screenshot of this. This is something that I've created. I use it quite extensively. I found it useful. So on request, I'm just putting this back. Edward, if you can hear me, I'll pause. And if there's something that you'd like to share or add to conclude the session, that'll be great.
Yeah, Afeef. Yeah. Thank you so much, Afeef, for equipping us to deal with the VUCA world. It was really a great and helpful session. Thank you everyone for attending this webinar. I hope it was an enlightening session for all, and you shall be able to adapt to the constantly changing circumstances around you with an agile mindset and a positive one. You all can get back to us in case of any questions. Also, feel free to share your feedback. Thanks once again, Afeef, and thank you everyone. Take care and be safe.
Thank you, everybody. Right, I'd like, if you want to stay connected, my parents have gifted me with a pretty unique name, so you can find me on LinkedIn quite easily. So I'm Afeef Ahmed. Some of you probably missed the introduction when we started off. So Team Marticus and Edward, thank you once again for the opportunity. And to everybody else, have a great day. Stay safe. Thank you very much.